archives of Prasar Bharati presents the timeless treasure of golden era.
We welcome you to our program. Welcome to Studio One.
It's a delight to be here on this program and to have two people who are brilliant in their own fields of art. One is the internationally renowned electronic artist and filmmaker, and she of course teaches at Leeds College of Art in England. And Manuela Benini, who is a Kathak dancer and choreographer among other things. We'll start with you, Manuela, first. Kathak dance, for somebody who studied Afro-Brazilian for most of her life, how did this happen?
I studied as a child classical ballet,
Okay.
and by the time the teenage years hit, I was bored of classical ballet. It's a very, form where you have to practice a lot and you have to, it hurts your feet. So I thought, I wanted to do something different.
Yeah. So
Little
you
I
rebelled.
knew the hard work that Kathak is.
Right.
So I moved to England when I was 17 and didn't want to do classical ballet anymore. So my mom recommended for me to do something which was equally as challenging, if not more. And then I joined the Kathak class, which we have in England, obviously, many accomplished South Asian dancers and teachers and gurus. So I joined a class, and after that it was a long journey.
But in the meanwhile, you also learned Japanese dance as well.
Yes, I've also studied Bhuto, which is a form of contemporary Japanese dance, looking at elements from post-Hiroshima events. So a few dancers decided to do a dance which was about what Japan became after the nuclear bomb, after the event. So they developed a very rigorous kind of physical training to prepare the body of that post era, looking at image work and very strong mental images that will be translated to the body. And the body of the dancer needed to be rigorously trained. So very hardcore, almost like athlete training, where the body goes through very different things. We trained a lot in nature. We trained in the water. We trained in the mountains. So we were challenging the body, pushing the boundaries of the body. So that was an interesting training on the form of Bhuto. But I'm not a Bhuto dancer. I just use elements from that rigorous training into my work.
Do you ever get confused when you're on stage or practicing, whether you're doing Kathak or Afro-Brazilian or Bhuto, or do they just come together in your being and it doesn't matter?
No, I'm not confused at all. Once I'm doing one thing, I know exactly what it is. So it's like downloading a program for different styles, but I know I don't get confused. I would like to get more confused, so then I would have a bigger dialogue between them. So sometimes I put myself in a confused state to see what happens.
That's very well said. Annabeth, how did your interaction or conversation with your work start? What drew you to doing the kind of work you are?
I was very lucky or blessed to have a family that was very creative. My mother was a music teacher, and I was kind of drawn towards fine art, but I don't want to portray my age. I was around a time where computers started to becoming ubiquitous into the house, certainly in the UK, and they would allow you to actually do computer graphics and animation. So actually, as I was just coming through the school system, I kind of got interested in that. It was very, very new at the time. So that kind of led to my university education into something called interactive arts. So I suppose the posh term is convergence. I was kind of interested in the fact that the film industry, the games and media were actually starting to kind of talk to each other. I suppose the buzzword at the moment, we call it transmedia or cross-platform storytelling. So, I mean, even today, your show's on Facebook, we're here physically and things like that. This interests me. So, but it's only now the technology's caught up with the ideas I had as a child and things like that. So,
animation now in itself is almost a fine art.
Oh God, yes.
Isn't it? So how have you worked towards that?
Well, yes, at Leeds College of Art, I teach moving image. We have an undergraduate programme in animation. I tend to teach kind of the compositing end of things, so that's kind of After Effects. So these are kind of softwares we use. And as you kind of say, it's a art in itself. So it's so multidisciplinary. Where do you begin? From puppets in stop motion now to computer graphics, where again I'm kind of interested, but that in itself enables me to kind of maybe work with someone like Manuela through motion capture to then bring other kinds of avatars and characters to life and things like that. So I'm generally more a technician in a way. I like to empower the artists, if that makes sense. So I kind of
makes sense.
Yeah.
And together you're empowering women by that beautiful choreography piece that you're working on. How did this happen?
Well, actually, one that's quite interesting for me is your pain dance, the one with the red shawl and things like that. That was because that came through just workshopping, really, doesn't it? And you'd already thought of the idea, but then one of the visuals we developed for the show, it's only in its kind of genesis at the moment. But rather than using the traditional programs, I actually used a video game engine to actually make the visuals, because where I would like to take it in the future is that Manuela on the stage is actually puppeteering a digital character that kind of complements her dance, or is actually an extension of her dance. So that's where we kind of work together, because I don't want to just do technology for the sake of technology. I want it to actually have a reason.
To make it more human, really.
Yes.
Isn't it ironic that we are using technology in today's world and trying to give it a human face?
Yes.
Isn't it?
Well, is that a bad thing? I think it's just...
It's a good thing.
Yeah, because I think it's just I mean, we have moved into the 21st century, I think as this is my first time in India, I mean, it's just interesting. Everywhere's so connected now. So I don't even...
So do you feel a stranger in India as yet?
No.
In the last 24 hours?
No, not at all. And I think, I don't know how much that is down to technology, or just the fact that I've tried to be open-minded, but I think, yeah. Or is that, well, maybe that's a bad side of things as well, globalisation, maybe. But.
Coming back to you, Manuela, when you mentioned the dances that you've been practicing, they all have their own rigors, and yet they are very different from each other. Ballet, of course, has its own expressions, and so does Bhuto. But Kathak in particular is known for its footwork and for the beautiful abhinaya, which is very exquisite. How do you kind of what do you prefer doing, and why?
I think when I was younger, I started learning Kathak when I was 17. I was obviously more interested in the aesthetic side of the dance, of doing the fast pirouettes, of doing fast footwork and getting the sum and extending the sum. But as I get older and my knees are more wary, I obviously started to understand abhinaya. I haven't even touched the surface, but I understand that maybe, as my teacher says, Kumudini Lakia from Ahmedabad, the dance starts when you're still. So I'm starting to understand that abhinaya is a I suppose I could say is a form of dance beyond dance, because it's feeling, is the emotions, is how one movement, like no theater in Japan, for instance, how they move one fan and it represents a waterfall, or how the blink of an eye represents the mother love for the baby. So that is something that I think I find the connections with different art forms where is in your mind and you transfer it into the body. So it's not from the body, it's from something else that is translated to the body. So I'm much more interested now in abhinaya because it's so challenging and it puts me in contact with something that is very precious.
The thing about abhinaya in Indian dance, any kind of expression, is that it comes from a very, very long cultural history. For example, in abhinaya, in Kathak, you especially have the Radha and Krishna scenes. And there is this very exquisite quality of lajja, for example, which is so particular to our culture. We don't see this much anywhere else. Isn't that true?
It's true, and that's a conversation I was having yesterday with the international dancers in the Yadevi tour. How do we translate this into a different culture? Because obviously when I perform in Brazil, no one knows the histories of the Ramayana, no one knows who Krishna is. But I suppose what we were discussing is this is beyond culture. This is human, and that love or that quality is human. So it's beyond language barriers, it's beyond culture barriers. So I suppose that's the beauty of abhinaya. When you're expressing something, of course, in India has a different connotation than it would have in Brazil, but the feeling that the audience is having somehow would be the same, even though it's from a different cultural context, if it's portrayed in a truthful way, I suppose. So I think that is when the barriers of culture and language are broken, is through abhinaya, you know. And I don't know if when I perform in Brazil and people come and tell me what they felt, it doesn't matter if they don't know who Radha and Krishna is.
That's true.
You know?
It's the purity of the emotion
Yeah,
really that matters. In your case, Annabeth, it's interesting that by virtue of being the virtual world, it really doesn't need a language, and the visual world of yours.
Well, maybe it's because we're making a new one.
Yeah.
I mean, to put some kind of my work in context, did Second Life ever make its way to India? It's a virtual platform.
Yes, yes, of course.
Okay. So I used that about when it was just really coming out, so that would be nearly a decade ago. And I certainly went in with the question of, you have this opportunity to have a virtual space, but I was kind of upset that people just replicated the real. So certainly my artistic practice, which I developed kind of experiences. You know, it's like, well, actually, why do you have to be human? You could be a cloud, or why do we need to even respond to gravity? So take the staircases out. So actually what was kind of interesting is actually, we were talking about this last night, skeuomorphic things where you'd still have to echo the real world just for context and understanding, but then actually, so it becomes an icon rather than actually just what it means. So I'm playing with that, but a lot of things I was doing in Second Life goes back to what I'm interested in now, which is just bringing people together through technology. So I'm interested in social play, or what we call ludic technology, kind of. I suppose Pokemon Go is just out at the moment. As much of it, I think that's so interesting, just to get kids back out and seeing how something like that could be then embraced by dance projects or other forms of storytelling to bring a community together. And I think we're actually at the cusp of something new. And I don't know if in our industry, the media industry, we have to kind of, how do we take this on and how do we work with it? So
I'm sure things will happen by and by. But since you mentioned the virtual world coming together, or the animated world coming together with actual live dance, how does it really work?
I think what we're trying to figure out.
Do you when you visualize the dance for her, you have the backdrop that you that you create. Is it different when you do it for an Indian audience or for a foreign audience, or do you try to add that extra layer of meaning so that people can understand even if they don't understand
I think
the dance
with when we did the show in UK, I suppose my kind of design problem, or the kind of brief I kind of set myself, was from a Western perspective, as you were kind of saying, a blink of an eye, a movement of a hand. I suppose when I was thinking about the visuals, is how to bring that to a Western audience. And so what we tend to do is video project behind rather than build set. So it's kind of like video projection and things like that. But simple things like we describe a forest, but it would be Manuela and Devika's hands making the forest, and they would slowly move, and then as it becomes like a bit of a narrative, then they kind of the shift and they get bits and things like that. So, but what it does, it makes something that's so small on stage blowing up, and then you actually start seeing how much work is going on in the dance form. So I suppose that's my contribution.
That's a great contribution. Manuela, since we are talking about how Annabeth with her skills enhances a dance performance, but come to think of it, when we look at Indian classical dances, they are usually performed most of the time on a bare stage, in limbo, because everything is created through gestures, through the bhav, through the music. Do you think somewhere, does it ever become an impediment to suddenly have animated backdrop, or having a conversation with technology as a part of your...
No, I think it actually enhances, you know, and if we think about international audiences, it makes it more accessible to then access the cultural layer, the language layer. So I suppose it makes it more accessible for audiences not only in India but all over the world. And there are great artists like Akram Khan who collaborate with many different techniques and many different mediums to make their shows something which is spectacular, you know. So I suppose they're only adding to each other, you know, to make the message or the show much more reaching different layers.
How do the masters of Kathak or pure dance forms, how do they respond to your performances, which are multimedia performances?
So I think we're going to find out.
I suppose we're going to find out. We have about 5 shows in Delhi and Calcutta in this part of the tour. We invited different gurus to come and see the show, especially in Kamani on the 27th of this month at 12 p.m. We're looking forward to seeing who's going to come and what the response will be. I suppose at the moment we had from the last 2 tours in India, we had very positive feedback, and I suppose it's like they're happy to see the younger generation bringing something new to the stage. But we're very interested in seeing what the gurus in Delhi are going to say about it.
Now, this interpretation that you bring forth for women's empowerment, where there are these goddesses from various parts of the world who seem to be coming together and partying together. What is this all about?
I suppose this is portraying powerful female characters on stage. For instance, as a younger Kathak dancer, I always question myself, why is this Naika always upset or always belonging or waiting for the lover? And I know that many artists from my generation are interested in portraying a woman which is a bit more empowered. And I suppose that was one of the ideas of Devika at the start of the project, which was about 4 or 5 years ago, that she wanted to portray female characters who are strong, who are in control, and who are powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I noticed with the kind of being choosing gods in these kind of mythologies, the archetypes, I think, is really what we were playing with, and then again universal. So.
What kind of archetypes do you think there are?
Well, we've got the warrior woman, we've got the mother. Don't really have the crone, do we? Not yet. And the young girl and stuff like that. So yeah. So these are projects we're developing. So
now online on Second Life, you're Angry Beth Shortbread, strong woman by that name.
Seriously, that's where I came from. Yeah, I think it was actually again going back to that idea of people wanting to replicate the real. I think it even went a bit further. People wanted their idealised self. So actually, my characters. Originally was quite... I wanted to make it as ugly as I could.
That's a novelty, because most people do in the virtual world look so beautiful.
Yeah, and it's aspirational and things when you get given those things, but I think it was quite interesting to
But can it ever be confusing? Because, you know, when you live in the virtual world for a very long time, trying to come back to earth, come back to the normal world, and seeing yourself in the mirror can be a bit of a shock.
Thankfully, I keep things in moderation. Yes. is what it should be. But no, you're right. I think that what we call dehumanization. I think it could be a worry. But then at the same time, one thing I found really amazing with Second Life was actually how it enabled disabled. And there was, I'm trying to remember what their condition was. Basically, it was a kind of like Gestalt. It was like 4 people came together to be one avatar, because one person could kind of press one button. They were so kind of like kind of locked in syndrome, literally. But together they could form an avatar. So when you met them in the game, it's
so nobody is ever disempowered in the virtual world.
This is All India Radio Archives recording.
There are no issues of women's empowerment or children's rights.
I think we're just at that frontier now. I think it's good because it's actually people are starting to look at that, where it's obviously can be exploited. as I say, I was very lucky to be at art college when Tim Berners-Lee just went, here's the World Wide Web, have it all, have it for free. And I love that philosophy. And now obviously we're watching big corporations putting firewalls around things and trying to restrict and say, I want the old internet back, where it was actually could be about expression and freedom, allow voices not to be censored or to actually talk their story rather than it just being filtered. So I love the world of blogging and things like that. I mean, it's it's overwhelming actually, I think, really, when you sit down.
And it is a beautiful world where a voice can be heard no matter how weak it is, isn't it? When we talk about weak voices, one interesting way to enable people is obviously through education, which is something we are working very hard here in India. I don't know how aware you are of it, but you must be, aren't you, Manuela?
Absolutely, yes. And even the producers of this project that we're doing, City Foundation, is a foundation who is working with the Katyani Balika Ashram, representing, giving educational skills and tools for 85 young orphan girls between the age of 5 and 15. So that's this course for us is very important to be part of, because as a project that is looking at empowering women, being partnered with City Foundation and raising awareness through interviews like this, through newspapers, to raise awareness of the work that many people like Charo does. I have thousands of NGOs that are looking at education as a tool for empowerment. It's a privilege to be here talking about it and being part of it.
And how does dance come into it? Can dance be used as a tool of empowerment or education?
From a personal point of view, it empowers me as a human being, especially classical Indian dance. I suppose we have the stamping, which give us ground. We have the spins that give us access. We have the stories that give us air and poetry. So I suppose from a personal point of view, if I spend a lot of time without dancing, I lose faith. So it gives me faith, and it gives me a sense of belonging and being a woman or a human being. So I suppose just that alone is very empowering.
Annabeth, does that make sense?
Well, I mean, as a pedagogic kind of thing, I mean, one thing that's happening in England is we've took the arts and the sciences and separated them. And I suppose what you're kind of saying is like, your way of learning is embodied, and as how could dance be of value to education? I mean, dance is forces, it's physics. You could actually teach science through dance.
In fact, that has been our tradition, to have maths and astrology and astronomy and all the other arts all together in one tradition of education. It was never separated, as what you just pointed out has been done by in
we're
the
slowly
West
trying to bring it back. I think we lost something. And I think people,
but it's wonderful that people are thinking about that at the moment. Has associating with Manuela changed your worldview? Are you looking at things differently from the dance perspective?
Well, I've always been fascinated in movement anyway. I mean, I did theatre as well as in my past, and I was interested in puppets and things so much. I think actually what I get more from Manuela and actually from Devika and everyone I tend to associate myself with, they're more than just the craft. They want their craft to enable stories, or as you say, kind of charities, or just world awareness. And I think that's why that's what I learn, and that's why I gravitate towards these people, because they want to do something more.
I suppose it's what we're talking yesterday. I suppose I can't justify being a dancer for dance sake, even though it's a valid point, and I know I have many friends who do that. It has to be more. It has to be a political context, and we were discussing that yesterday. For us, art needs to have a very strong political content. For me to justify spending my time doing it, it's dance for dance sake for me is not enough, or arts for art's sake is not enough.
Which is the traditional belief that art has to remain pure in its very being. But you'd like to take it a step further and use it for social uplift.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
and
that's
a
good.
lot of people would disagree with me, but on a personal level.
This is All India Radio
Have you ever
Archives
thought of
recording.
really bringing in dance or bringing in ancient traditions that we all belong to all over the world into the virtual world, which right now seems to be unidimensional? There is no backstory really.
No, well, it's what do they call it?
Unless it's a backstory that the individual creates for himself.
Well, the one phrase is they call it the metaverse, so it's all universes in one as well.
It is,
so,
true.
I mean, personally, I'm kind of interested in.
Which is also the basic of all filmmaking, because when you create characters, you need backstories.
Yeah.
You have to know where they've come from, what is it that drives them, or what are their quirks and peccadillos. You have to know those, but those are then on an individual level. What is the ancestry? Where do they come from?
Well, I suppose what you got there is. I mean, again, why I was kind of drawn to a space like Second Life, because what you're kind of describing there, I suppose, is the authored. You know, me as a director trying to generate a world and craft something like that. And I think that's why it's probably ingracious to actually call Second Life a game, because it wasn't. It was it was like a platform. Yeah. So that's probably why it was storyless, because really it was just a function. It was a city, populated. So so there's these kind of two things going on, but kind of going back to the author. I mean, there's a game comes out next month called Bound. I think it's a PlayStation exclusive. But what's great in there is the protagonist you play is a dancer, and she dances through a virtual world, and that's how you kind of interact with it, and you kind of have agency in that space. So what's interesting, particularly in the indie game movement. People are trying to play with this now and kind of go, well, there's no rules, let's play, and let's be interdisciplinary as well. So I think it's again, as I say, interesting times that
new conversations, new histories.
It's a leveler in a way,
Yeah.
and I think for like a young generation as well, it's like it's what's Jim Jarmusch say, kind of take from the old and do it again, but just make it better. So.
And you never know when the virtual world, which now reflects the real world, will start reflecting the real world.
Probably has already.
It has already to some extent, but for the greater good. Where does pedagogy come with animation? How does it thrill you?
It's interesting comparing it to like filmmaking. If we take it down to the individual, I think when you're kind of being an animator, or certainly when I talk to animators, I think they kind of move from filmmaking to animation, because you're in control of everything. So that idea of world building and story world creating, you're kind of very affecting in everything, whereas generally filmmaking is quite a collaborative process. Not to say animation isn't. And I think a lot of people get drawn to that. So in the pedagogic sense of teaching that, I think as much as you've got very fundamental things, and I suppose this goes back to dance, in certainly Western traditions of animation, we have something called the 12 principles. So that's kind of things can squash and stretch but remain volume. Timing is critical, because without timing you don't have comedy, you don't have emotion and things like that. Mise en scène from film and theatre, you have to think about the staging and the whole like visual language that comes with that. And again, good animation borrows from every other art form, so from painting and stuff like that. Going back to the science bits, we teach students, things move in arcs. So your body moves in arcs. Nothing's linear in a way, so thinking about curve. And that's always one thing I like working about dancers. You always have a line of, we call it the line of action. But you know when you're in the right position because it feels right, but when I look at it I go, yes, there's a line of action there, there's a kind of curve through their body of power or kind of energy kind of through it. So they're things you teach, and really what you teach an animator is to observe the world is really what it's kind of about. One module I teach the kind of more kind of conceptual stuff like dissertations, but there's a kind of whole new genre of animation in documentary animation. Seems to be kind of taking over. So again, going back to the pedagogy, just enabling the youth to kind of go, well, this is your medium, but go back, what's the message that you're going to do with animation?
Because the medium can't be the message.
Oh, that's a tricky one, though, isn't it?
It can be the tool.
Yeah, it's the tool. And again, I suppose I think that what fascinates me about kind of convergence is the message can then be propagated in different media as well. So, yeah.
I've learned the same. Sorry to interrupt you. My teacher always told me, you know, if you want to learn how to dance, look how the trees are moving, look how the leaves are falling, look how the birds are flying. So it is observing life, you know.
Oh yeah, we
it's
get
very interesting
bags of flour and flop them on the ground.
This brings me to a question which I want to ask both of you. In life, there is no perfection ever, which of course we see in animation. How perfect can it be in dance?
I don't know. I think I've seen once a dancer dancing Odyssey. I couldn't stop crying because what I saw was pure beauty. Everything was just perfect. But I suppose when I talked to her and I said, my God, you made me go to a place I've never been in my life. And then I went to visit her in her ashram where she dedicates her life to Odyssey. And then I understood, you know, that she's completely connected. Her life and her art form is one. There's no separation. So is that union, you know, is that connection.
That connectedness is the perfection.
I suppose that's what I saw. I saw perfection. I saw perfection in what she was dancing.
Which may or may not happen in the movement of the hand or in the way the eye turns. That's not necessary because it's the connectedness.
Yes.
Whereas the virtual world is, well, so far has always been perfect. Is that true? Or are you working towards the imperfections now to make it more real?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. There's a whole movement, I suppose, in computer art of glitching. We like the glitch. We embrace it. We like the bugs, things that go wrong.
What is glitch?
A glitch when, well, maybe in television it might just go kind of little. And I think that does. Yeah, it kind of removes that surface.
Yeah, it's like looking for the accepting the human flaw.
Yes, yeah, and yeah, we're all flawed.
We are all flawed.
So, but it's like we were talking about yesterday. We're all cursed by the human condition, regardless of where we are in the world. So, yeah, so why not in the virtual world as well?
Manuela, you've had a long India experience. Anything in particular that you'd like to share with us?
Since the first time I came to India, I'm fascinated. I suppose my fascination is by the people and what I see on the streets. I have no words to say how much this place changed who I am and make who I am every time I come here. It pushes me to emotions and to humanity that nowhere else in the world pushes me, and I'm from Brazil, and we experience quite disparities in social classes as well as here. But here what I see and what gives me a lot of power, I suppose, is that people get on with their lives independent of the situation they're living. And that's something I take back to many countries. I go and I say, you know, you have no idea what you have, you know, we are so fortunate. And there's people in different countries, and I quote sometimes India, where they don't have a lot, but when you look at them and when you speak to them, they have everything, because they are human beings, they have humanity, you know.
They have
I don't know how to explain, but you know, there's something here, Mother India. I don't want to sound like a hippie, but there is. It just makes me want to cry.
But maybe that's the thing in the West. We've got privilege and so much stuff. We get the reverse. You'd think we should be happy, but we have what you call a
that's
noonie.
What I say. You know, we have everything, but we have nothing. You know, there's so much mental health issues. There's so much depression. There's so much suicide. I don't know what the figures are here in terms of depression, suicide, but when I look at the figures in Europe, it's alarming. You know, they have education. They have houses that the government provides. They have food, they have everything that money can buy, but there is a very, very alarming level of mental health issues, which I don't know what the levels are here, you know.
Well, there are some levels here as well, some issues here as well, but by and large, because as you rightly said, it's not what we have that makes us, it's who we are that makes who we are. What are you expecting, Annabeth, on this trip to India?
Well, I had all the kind of expectations of, as you're kind of saying, seeing massive, well, I'm trying to find the right language, but I would call it class difference. But things that strike me so far is just how colourful the city is, and we're commenting on just the fact there's just trees everywhere. I mean, that's just kind of alien to me. I have to go out into the countryside for that. But to just sit on a building, actually walk down the street, and it's just tree lined. I mean, that's beautiful.
That's beautiful.
I mean, it has a good function as well.
Yes.
It keeps pollution down.
You come to India at a time where we're in the monsoon season.
Yeah.
And we love our rains, unlike
I'm waiting for that.
Unlike you. And you will probably understand the meaning of what it is to smell the rain, to smell the fresh soil in this weather. Manuela, you've experienced both.
Well, actually, it's the first time I'm in Indian monsoon, and just seeing a sky which is not blue is wonderful, because I've never experienced that I've been coming to India for more than 15 years. I've never came in the monsoon, so I'm looking forward to understanding that monsoon ragas when I see the rain.
So although you've heard the Malhar and you have experienced probably what happens in dance in this season, you're going to see it for the first time.
Yes.
Have you ever wondered what it was all about, why the Indians were so crazy about the rains? Well,
I suppose when you only have it for 3 months a year, you can understand, especially in the heat, you know.
I had a visitor who'd come from England, and he said
it rains all the time.
He said, "Oh, it's raining," and we were so happy. Then after 3 days here, he says, "Oh, it's raining." So his thought process changed.
But when you get a good storm or a good even I go out and put my wellies on and dance around in it.
Absolutely.
It's great. Can't beat good rain.
Like our peacocks do in your dance.
Yeah.
Can you ever get this sort of this joie de vivre in your virtual world? Are you think that we will go towards that too as science progresses?
Yeah, I think the danger at the moment is how I think even though people are kind of connected, there seems to be a pressure, certainly with social media, that we always have to present ourselves at the best, and ultimately that can be quite horrible in a way, because then again it lifts everyone's aspirations up. So I suppose when you have virtual worlds and now we're kind of getting more interconnected or telepresence kind of technologies, I think we're getting away from the keyboard and the filter, and then we're actually going to have more and more embodied kind of experience to a point. Well, science fiction says you might not even tell the difference. But is that new? I mean, Plato was saying that thousands of years ago, that we're maybe all just living in a cave.
So we do always dip into our past, don't we?
Yeah.
Have virtual societies, how different are they from our real societies?
Well, I think positive ones. I mean, there's ever come across someone called Howard Rheingold? I mean, he kind of like coined things like cyberspace and stuff like that. And I think when you start seeing movements like crowdsourcing and crowdfunding, I think that's enabling in a completely new way. I hope it doesn't end up getting exploited, but at the moment I think just the fact that you can pay as you feel, or you can support a musician through donations, through a button and things like that, it just allows people freedom to be creative. I look at the positives of YouTube. I was kind of saying to Devika's daughter this morning, because she said, what do you prefer, YouTube or the BBC? And I said, well, actually, if YouTube allows you to be your own producer, your own filmmaker, then that's a great thing, more. And that would be the interconnectedness and the stories and the humans.
It's also changing mindsets. You're breaking all old molds. Manuela, about dance is that you have to maintain the purity of it all, no matter what. You have to remain within that. So how do you transcend the mold and yet keep it?
I'm not at that level yet. I'm still in the mold. What my teacher says is you have to do everything I said, and then you have to not do what I say. You know?
That's a toughie.
Yes, that's a toughie. So I suppose I've done enough Kathak for my muscle to have a memory of the form, and I do have dialogues with other forms through Kathak as well. But I suppose it's once it's in your muscles, you don't have to think about it anymore, and I suppose that's, you know, that's when you can step further, when you don't have to think about it anymore.
But when you do it in, say, Bhuto, because you have incorporated aspects of it, and which is training your muscles in a totally different manner from what you do in Kathak or you've done in other dance forms, does one ever kind of leak into the other one?
I don't know, because I spend more time in Kathak. That's the language that I spend more, my muscle is more used to. I've only experimented with Bhuto as a way of training my body and seeing what other forms can bring to the Kathak. So I don't know, I haven't reached the level on that muscle memory on Bhuto.
Yeah. But Bhuto is more of an
internalization
of an emotion,
internal, yes.
Whereas Kathak is the abhinaya, or the expression.
Yes. But that's when they connect, because to go beyond that, you have to be totally focused on that image. I remember once I saw Saraswati Sen dancing. She was portraying a forest. That was about 10 years ago. And when she was portraying the forest where the Naika was, I could see the texture of the leaves. I could see what size the tree was. And that is only because she was in the forest, in her mind. I could see it. So I suppose there is a, you know, by her experience, she achieved that without the need of a training of a Bhuto dancer, which is precisely that. And she achieved that through Kathak. But I just tried to take a shortcut. And yeah.
The need to be tactile in dance, as in virtual reality.
Oh yeah, I mean at the moment I think it's interesting how limited it is. So
this is All India Radio.
Even when you kind of got an avatar, all it does is a predetermined emote. So as technology catches up and you start getting things like Connect cameras in your living room and they can body track you and things like that, I think that that body language will start coming through, because at the moment it's lacking in that. Getting to the tactile, obviously there's a technology to look at haptics. So that can be very simple things, from like when you're playing a video game, it has force feedback, it'll like shake, it'll give you a kind of a sensation, and I think obviously that'll develop. I know even Disney are looking at kind of technology that when you kind of hover your hand, you can feel a texture. It uses kind of ultrasonics, so it's very, very early development. But the fact you can kind of feel like you're stroking a cat, that's what they're getting to, you know, and maybe that's where we might be in 10 years and stuff like that. So when you kind of have an interface that's tactile, but then can go further, I mean, I just get curious about, well, actually, how would that enable... well, I already know that there's lots of research for things like keyhole surgery where they use these kind of technologies so they can do these kind of miraculous things. So what's interesting, what comes from like maybe entertainment ends up then feeding the sciences. So yeah, I think these very simple things, touch is important, becomes a technical problem we need to solve, but then you never know its offshoots as well. So it might start in entertainment, but you don't know where it goes.
And it goes well beyond just mere storytelling or playing games in the virtual world. It can really and truly change the world we live in.
Yeah, I mean, there's a project I'm doing at Leeds Leeds University, sorry, that we're teaching kind of earth sciences through games, and on a one simple level, it's allowed people that could never go out in the field to study to at least have a kind of field experience. So that's kind of interesting. And then in departments of transport, they're looking at urban planning, but when you can kind of turn it into a game or gamify creating a city and then give it to the entire population, it goes back to this crowdsourcing idea. Let them play a game to see what a democratic group of people would say is the idealised city layout. So sometimes the game technology allows you to kind of do it again, iterations again and again and again. And then you see other kinds of positive things. There's like games where you're solving protein chains. So if it's nice, like Candy Crush. But actually what you're doing is you're solving a very important problem, which actually the data is then given to the scientists, and so actually we're helping do things like pattern recognition and crowdsourcing through the computers and through our play, actually things that are very useful.
We have a small crowd here, Annabeth and Manuela. I'm sure they would like to ask you questions.
Like today's youth, they are more into like Western forms of dance, and don't you feel like the folk dance or classical forms of dance, they are like overshadowed by Western forms of dance?
You mean in India or abroad?
Like all over.
So you think, you ask, your question is if contemporary dance or Western forms of dance are overshadowing classical Indian dances?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think she means pop, pop music, pop dance, which is not contemporary dance because it has a language, but a dance which doesn't really belong to any genre.
I suppose if we
in India we use the euphemism Bollywood dancing.
Bollywood dancing, yes. I suppose when you're looking at in a commercial sense, we're producing things that the audience wants to see, or that maybe we are taught that we are manipulated. Maybe I don't know if I could use that word, that we want to see. So if I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure because I don't understand the Indian context of contemporary dance. I've only seen a few through Gatti Forum, and I don't know what the context is here.
I think she also, what she really means is, what you can call a spontaneous dance form, which doesn't have a form, but you just respond to music. Do you think because that's easier done, is now more popular because when you have to learn classical dances, you have to put in your blood, sweat and tears.
If you want to learn, if you want to be a Kathak dancer, you need at least 8 to 10 years of training. And if you want to do Bollywood, you can do 2 months. And if you're good with coordination, you can, So of course, it's more accessible for the audience. It's more accessible for you as a dancer to learn. Folk dances, this is in the blood, isn't it?
Yeah.
You listen to a music or you dance around the fire. That's something that you do it. You don't have to learn that.
Thank you very much for your question.
Did I answer your question, sweetheart?
Yeah, ma'am.
So it's okay to choose any kind of dance you like. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Well, I suppose the same with animation. Anyone can animate.
Right.
But I think, and I suppose with dance, we want to enable everyone to enjoy the process, but then everyone appreciates the skill of someone that takes it as a specialism. So you see it in animation where you can have quick animations on YouTube, but when you see something like Studio Leica's stop motions like Paranorman or Coraline, that's dedication and years, and you just applaud the effort.
Yeah, you become a connoisseur.
Yeah.
Of good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I think that's what art tradition is learn to develop a taste.
Okay. Any questions?
Dansuri, my question is for Manuela. It's a proven fact that as you switch from one language to the other, for instance, a German speaker turns to English, so his psychology, his behavior changes. He completely changes as a person. So do you feel the same when you switch from ballet to Kathak?
Completely.
Yeah?
Yes, completely. Yes, if I'm doing an Afro-Brazilian dance, or even if I'm doing a dandiya dance, my expressions, everything changes. Yes, I completely agree.
Does your self-image also change, like what you see yourself at that point, or?
Yes, I suppose I cheat because I do bring the grace of Kathak in the other forms. So I'm a bit of a cheater in that sense. So even if I'm doing traditional Afro-Brazilian dance, because as I'm sure you know, there's a lot of African influence in the culture in Brazil, I still use a little bit of Kathak grace in there, and everyone goes, wow. So I'm a bit of a cheater. I use a little bit of Kathak in all the other forms because it just becomes so much more gracious.
Thank you.
That's beautifully put. Very well expressed. Thanks. Thank you for your question.
Can we have the chance to listen your voice? Any variation of Kathak dance, just like Uthan, koi Toda, koi Chakardati Hai, any Paran Kat, Toda, whatever you like. We would like to hear from your voice.
So this
please.
is
Thank
a
you.
Paramelu that we're doing in the Yadevi show.
Yeah.
Driga changira, changa changa, taka dira kachanga na changa, taka kuku dikta digidikite, taka kuku dikta digidikite, taka kuku dikta digidikite. Tripoli. So repeat it 3 times. And Paramelu are tukuras that uses elements and sounds from nature. Yeah, I love Paramelus.
And what is wonderful is that when you perform this little piece, it doesn't really matter for the listener on the radio, because he can still connect somehow with what you're saying. The visual is not necessarily necessary. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
More questions?
Yes, that's
One
interesting what you say, because when in Ahmedabad, where I spend most of my time, there is a Saptak Festival of Music. And there was a professor who once told me, oh, I would love to hear you dancing. And I thought it was very interesting that he used the word hearing for dancing. And then I understood what he meant, and I was, very beautiful. So
that's very well put, isn't it?
I am tempted to ask a question, if I may.
Yes, Amlan.
Actually, whether it is your animation or dance, everything has to be seen is set in the context of a social milieu, and you just can't take it out of that social milieu, the context. And there is a process of acculturization. So do you ever feel that when you have been doing so many dance forms, you're experimenting with so many dance forms, like Jocelyn asked you, that does one form walk into the other, and whether in a conscious way you should do a little bit of fusion of different forms?
Yes. In this show, Yadevi, I'm portraying a Brazilian goddess called Iemanjá. She's the goddess of the sea. So in the music itself, we are using elements of Afro-Brazilian music and chanting to kind of awaken the goddess and bring it to life through the music. I suppose like Indian classical music, Afro-Brazilian music, the drums and what is played in the drums has the quality to awaken different energies and different forces. So it's by the beat of drum and that kind of choreography of the beats. It would awaken different energies in the space, in the dancer, in the drummers. So I do fuse Afro-Brazilian dance and Kathak in this piece. So is an interesting space to be when you're looking at how they can communicate, but by still being truthful to Kathak and to the Odisha dance that I do. It requires, I don't think I'm there yet. I need to work more on how to be truthful to both forms. So I'm still experimenting with what you suggested. It takes a bit of experimentation and time in the studio to understand when I can cross the line and when I can't, when it becomes something else and when it doesn't. And I suppose that goes back to what my teacher says, it's when you have it so much, you don't have to think about it, you can then move forward.
Indeed, it was a pleasure listening to the interesting incidents from your life journey. Thank you, Professor Annabeth Robinson and Manuela Benini, for coming to our studios and inspiring us all. We wish you a pleasant stay in India.
Thank you for having us here.
And Ms. Vora, we are grateful to you too for joining us here.
Thank you very much for having me here.